Thank you. Yeah. So with community and an entity status comes funding. And there is a lot of money out there for telling these stories. But I'll share more of that with each of you as the conference goes on. But in all of the research work I've done, and I'm not a full-time academic, I'm actually a business owner, and I went to academia because I needed to have a second string. Like all the women on my farm do, we all have different things that we do besides just being on the farm. We all grew up like that. All the entrepreneurs making money in my family are women. The men are the farmers, the women are the ones putting the food on the table. The stories resonate around the world. This is the same story. So rural women's entrepreneurship has a kindred spirit to it. So what I want to share is you're sitting on a fantastic opportunity for women's entrepreneurship, for telling your stories here at this conference. All it will take is a couple getting together, putting up a Facebook page and start telling your stories, and that will attract others. And then as you build momentum and you work with folks like Becca and Tammy, send it to the State Library for the Memory Montana project. Start applying for humanities grants. This is where your entrepreneurship can take you. So I can also talk for hours about how to start a business and how to do this and the marketing and yada, yada, yada. I can do that for months, and I do in universities. But here, right now, through your community and the membership at this conference, you've got a fantastic resource. And I wanted to ask the president, because I was in the wrong room, but he was busy in a big conversation. And I thought, if, you know, Montana's Farmers Union had this product, this archive of rural women entrepreneur stories or rural women agricultural stories, that helps the image of Montana's Farmers Union. So you're just hearing entrepreneurship in action. It's not about going and getting VC funding for another Facebook or anything like that. It's really about work with what you've got. You're all living stories. And you've all got remarkable experiences that will feed into it. And it's as simple as connect and start telling the stories here. Tap into the resources with the speakers. And you can phone me, I'll help. And then take it forward so that it becomes an identity, rural women entrepreneurs. I call myself I actually say I'm a farmer's daughter. But when I'm in academia, I'm a rural woman entrepreneur. I struggle with English some days. I'm a rural woman entrepreneur. And there are free programs at there are free programs at MSU, and there are now new job opportunities coming through for rural women in entrepreneurship that can start as salary and then spin off. And that's the remote worker model. And I know Tara will be here, if she's not already, that will be speaking to that. So I know Tara, worked with her on that model as well. So I want you to take the power of your story and call it entrepreneurship, because that's what it is. Entrepreneurs solve problems. You can solve problems by communicating and sharing your stories. And from that, when you come together as a group, then you get grant money, and then it becomes bigger and better. So that's how I see entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much, then. That was excellent. And you will get a chance to ask these women questions. Yeah, give her a hand. And please, if you have a burning question, just raise your hand. Well, let's get right to it. After we go through the stories, we're going to make this a bit more interactive. So, Allie, I'll turn it to you. Allie's with the Prospera Food and Ag Development Center.
Hello. Yes, so I am newer to this role, and I am newer to Montana. I've been here for about 3 years. I grew up in Georgia, which the follow-up question is always, why don't you have an accent? I'm from the Atlanta area, so I feel like there's usually no Atlanta accent. But yes, I moved from there to North Carolina. That was my first time really living in more of a rural environment. Got passionate about food systems while I was living there. And when I moved to Montana, started a graduate program in sustainable food systems at Montana State. During that process, I also really fell in love with cultivated specialty mushrooms and foraging wild mushrooms. And about 2 years ago, helped co-found a specialty mushroom farm in Bozeman. And then 6 months ago, started with Prospera as their Food and Ag Development Center coordinator. And we've got 9 food and ag development centers across the state. Jan is also involved in that network. And a lot of what I'm doing is helping people find and apply for grants, people in the food and ag world.
Fantastic. Thank you, Allie.
I'm still working? Yeah. Oh, great. Well, Jan Tusick, I'm the Center Director for the Mission Mountain Food Enterprise Center. And, you know, I just have to, it's a long story. But I think what is so important for where my work and the people I work with is right now is that we look back and we look at all the passion and commitment from small farmers, women and men, who really believed that they needed to change something in the way we look at food, the way we feed our families, the way we support our farming community, and how we shift that needle. You know, some people like to call it social change. Some people might wrap entrepreneurship in there, but it's all about passion. It's all about passion about your communities. It's about passion for the place you live, your landscape that is so dear to probably everyone in this room. And so Mission Mountain Food Enterprise Center conceptualized out of that community. It was across this state of people who cared. And we started looking at, we need to address, you know, what we need to make this happen. What do we need to do? What, you know, it's the problem solving. And so our enterprise, which is a full-scale food processing facility, we're a food and ag center for the state of Montana. We're also a cooperative development center, looked at the how. We had that big end goal. We saw a picture that we wanted to move towards, and we need to figure out the how. So it's like I'm here speaking about it, but believe me, there's a big community standing behind me right now. You know, the Pam Gerwies of Western Montana. I could build a huge list. I mean, literally, we started from a small group of organic farmers who were like trying to market their food. And we had this huge silk parachute to, you know, try to save us from the environment, you know, so we can kind of look like we had a food stand on 93. And when that blew away and the refrigerator broke down that had like all our lettuce and stuff crammed in it, we said, we got to do something here. So we went to an economic development organization, and every community, every county or region in the state of Montana has one. And we brought a new concept. It's like agriculture is economic development. And they looked at us and they went, really? I mean, because everyone's, you know, you hear the stats. Agriculture is the largest industry in the state of Montana. Agriculture is the biggest industry in the state of Montana. But do we do anything about it? Do we create new opportunities and revenue streams? To create that entrepreneurial pathway or value-added ag opportunities? No, it's a great stat to throw out there, but when you look at the basically the economic structure in this state and the investment you put behind making that happen, it wasn't happening. I am talking 20 years ago. Some great things have happened. We have a food and ag center program. There's other things happening. We have a cooperative development center. But at that time, it was a new concept. But, you know, we're like, hey, our agriculture, we may not look like what you think of agriculture, but we are. So you need to work with us. So that local level economic development organization came to the table and gave us the house to springboard from, which is critical. Gave us the access to funding, gave us the access to start talking to state agencies. And that was really important. I think it was a critical first step to get the needle moving. We did community assessment. We want to hear from our local community. What do you think and what do you want? Key priorities that came up was food processing infrastructure, cooperatives, which I think is a wonderful thing, right, Tracy?
I hope so.
Yeah. Cooperatives. And so these are key tools, and that they wanted to get the product they raised to market. They wanted to sell their food to people that they live in that community with. Now, that should be the most easy thing in the world for us to do. Think about that. We should have every grocery store with our food in it. Is that a no-brainer? That's a no-brainer. So it's a system shift, because there are some pretty, there's some systems in place now that are hard to navigate and create shifts, but you're starting to see the parallels come in. And I was just talking about this with someone last night. You're not going to destroy a system, but you create parallel systems that you intersect. You find those intersections and you make them happen. So long story short, we have a full-scale food processing center, and I am honored to work with many food entrepreneurs who are women and women farmers and ranchers as they develop their enterprises to enter into markets and sell their food to their communities, which is what we should, it's something we should just naturally be doing. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
Before we head to Tracy, just out of curiosity, has anyone worked with the Food and Ag Development Centers before on their own projects? Oh, good. So you found a couple. Would you mind, since there's only 3 of you, telling us what the need was or what project you worked on?
Yeah, I mean, I have on my giant farm, I have 1 acre of hops. So when I was actually still living here in Butte, so I got to work with Joe at the Food and Ag Center here in Butte. And it didn't result in a lot of funding, which was okay because I didn't need it, but it was just the clarity and the help that I needed to kind of figure out what I was actually trying to do. So it was great.
That's awesome. I'm trying to give you guys some connections and people to talk to in the break. So go ahead. What was your need?
Actually, I worked for the Women's Development Corporation in Headwaters, so they have the food and development in there. So Courtney Lockler's her name, and she's helped me. We apply for programs, food processing. So she's an awesome resource, and I mean, she will stay up all night to help you get transcript. She's great.
Because there are 8 food and ag development centers around the state. Is that right?
9.
Okay, great. And the one more.
I sit on the board with Bear Law Development out of Hatter, Montana, up on the High Line, and Paul Press, he's in charge of that. And we also have we're very proud of our egg development portion and what we do. And it's great to see the new changes coming in. And I think over the last 20 years, you can see now how much the entrepreneurial is in agriculture. So it's a good program.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. We're going to tease out more of these resources. But Tracy, you want to go ahead from Montana Council of Cooperatives?
Yes, I actually have 2 titles. So I'm the director of the Montana Cooperative Development Center. And so in a fancy term, we build co-ops across the state. That's not the fancy term. Our fancy term actually is that we're addressing community and economic needs through the cooperative model. And then I'm also the administrator of the Council of Co-ops. So in the state of Montana, there's a lot of co-ops. There's over 160 though. And we have different sectors. So ag is one of the sectors that we serve. We also do electric co-ops, telecoms, and credit unions. And then we have a slew of other co-ops. So I love the cooperative community. I'm very passionate about it. Before I became the director and administrator for those 2 organizations, though, I grew up in a little town of Eureka, Montana. And my intro to agriculture, though we had a family farm and my dad was an AI technician, I was in a logging community. And so part of me definitely is very passionate about the timber and forestry industry as well, which oftentimes gets left out of the agricultural discussions. even though they're part of the USDA and a part of that world of natural resources as well. And so across my career, I started in economic development in 2003, pushing that 20-year mark. And I think at the time I entered, there was you and me, Kathy, maybe 4 other women in that field. So I am proud to say that women are very well represented in the economic development industry now. I was on the ground in Eureka for 13, 14 years, and then I did private consulting for a while. So I had a little bit of entrepreneurship spirit, and then I went back. I wasn't the best. I was really good at giving advice. I wasn't the best at running my own company is what I learned, which is something that I think we all can admit to and say, hey, I know where my strengths are, where I'm not. As a co-op development center, we are working across the state right now. Our big areas, we have a lot of discussions on meat processing, food hub development. People are wanting to mimic food processing centers. And then distribution, Mariah and her mom are working with us on some distribution studies on how do we move Montana food and actually how do we address grocery stores. One of my biggest concerns, truthfully, is grocery stores are starting to close in rural and reservation communities. And that's a scary thought. We start losing those essential services like that, we're in trouble. And so I am extremely passionate about rural. Whether it's Montana rural or Nebraska rural or wherever, rural is a part of life and we need to sustain it. And so that's probably where I've focused a lot of my career is how do we help those rural stores. We're also, just so you know, because I think that sometimes we get a little too focused, but I see a lot of moms in the room. We're also working on childcare and housing. 2 big issues that are facing every industry in our state. And we don't do it alone, guys. We work with partners, the food and ag development centers, all the local economic development organizations, and then a variety of other state agencies and organizations, which I think is really cool to start seeing because when I entered this, we were all pretty siloed, working in our own little fields and head down, just let's move forward. And we're starting to break those silos down and really start working and leveraging each other's work and passions.
Tracy, can you share with us really quickly? I got to attend her conference a few weeks ago, and one of the speakers was a woman who helped develop a grocery store co-op in Turner. Oftentimes we think about, again, my stereotype on entrepreneurs at the beginning, you think about, okay, who's the person leveraging their entire 401k to set something up, or, who's that one person taking on the risk? But the co-op model is a pretty interesting way to solve a problem in a community. Can you just share a bit more about that example?
Sure. So it's called Big Flat Co-op, grocery co-op, and it is in Turner, Montana. I got to go there this summer and I love it. We literally drove in unexpectedly and went in, met with Linda, who was at our conference, and her and I were just talking, and it was so funny. I think we met the entire town. By the time we were gone, it was like wildfire. There's 2 new girls in town. What's going on? And we literally, all these people are coming through, which was awesome. So what was happening there, and actually we have it happening in other communities. We have 4 co-op grocery stores now. We're seeing other ones coming to us inquiring how to do it. The grocery store was closed. People were driving anywhere from 30 to 100 miles to get their groceries. And the community rallied and said, this is something that we really need to do. So they worked, it was my predecessor that worked with them, that they created a grocery store co-op. The community has selected their board of directors. They were extremely fortunate when Linda said, I'll volunteer for a day, and that volunteering for a day led to her being their general manager. And she's incredible. And so they're doing really good. One of the issues with them right now, and I hope that I'm not oversharing, I have a tendency to do that sometimes, but right now is the distribution. They did during the pandemic lose a lot of their distribution network. So they actually are driving into Chinook once or twice a week, depending on what's going on in their community. And we're actually seeing that happen a lot as well, as small grocery stores combining to get orders. But it's been really successful. If you ever get to Turner, it's a beautiful little grocery store that had great produce. They keep it well stocked, and then they also have kind of a convenience store too, so you can get a cold soda or whatever you want. The nutritionist in the room, I did not just say soda, water. But no, it's wonderful. We also have them in Nightheart, Geraldine, and Lodgegrass. I always mix them up. Sorry, I apologize.
Fantastic. Well, I wanted to ask the panel what they think are the unique challenges or needs within our communities. But I thought since we have kind of an interactive group here, I'd love to, if anyone minds sharing either a bit about their story or maybe some of the needs that you identify in your community or problems that you're thinking, gosh, could I be a part of this solution? I'd love to pitch to these four experts a couple of things that we're working on. Maybe it's coming up with a new product and what do I do next? Or I've got a couple dairy cows. What do I do next? But what kinds of things are you guys working on that we might be able to get some advice from these ladies on where to go next? You weren't raising your hand. Did I have one up here? Great. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Linda Kiltz from Kalispell, Montana. We have some farmers every year and they just don't have the time or the resources to pick all of their crop. And so I think there's some nonprofits that they bring helping hands to help with picking, but making sure that they're getting to these co-op stores and grocery stores seems to be an ongoing challenge. And it seems like the people who volunteer for the food bank also volunteer for their church and volunteer for their co-op, and they volunteer all of that. So I guess my question is, how do we leverage helping these farmers pick their crops? And a lot of times it's organic crops that have a very short time period. They all need the resourcing at the same time. And then of course you get this overabundance, number one, and then also having the processing capacity, making it affordable and giving them the time and teaching them how to do large scale processing, because many don't know how to do that either. And so I kind of wonder, how do we look at that entire chain of the producer getting to the end user and making sure they have the resources?
I had the pleasure of sitting with Linda last night and we had a quick conversation about this. You said the magic word, teach. Reach out to Flathead Valley Community College. I know the gal that runs internships. If you can connect your need to an academic learning outcome, it can be built into an internship or a placement. Often the colleges will have funding that will pay the intern. I'm a supporter of paid internships, not unpaid, but it's really about matching the experience to their academic needs. MSU's got a strong program, has got a strong program. Every community college I've seen in I'm in the, what's it called? Mission Mountain area.
Yeah.
I'm still a bit new, but we've got 14 education institutions in our region, and they've all got some kind of program that will provide young folks that can do that. There's also the visa system. We can attract under 26, age 26 workers. Our farm in Australia lives on that. COVID shut it down for 1 year, but now it's opening up again. And we've actually had some marriages from that. So now we've got a couple of Danish surnames in our community, which has never happened before, because we all know our 5 surnames. But these programs exist. So if you research internships and job placements and connect it, work with that person in the college to connect it to learning objectives, it's viable. And then if you research the visa processes for under 26 workers.
Go ahead, Jen.
Well, there's quite a few resources in your area. I know they changed their name, Pam. Farm Hands.
Land hands.
Land Hands. Okay, so, I think it's really important that you find that community-based partner, and if they have a 501c3, you just help them put together the structure of a really good project and get the funding to support those volunteers to do that really good work. And they're looking at the local food bank in your area is looking at food processing. They're starting to build some infrastructure, but it's all about partnerships. It's all about getting the room together and saying, hey, how do we solve this one? and you've got this, and you have that, and you have this capacity. Let's work together. But gleaning, you're talking about gleaning, and it's a huge issue. And I think there are some people doing it really well. Where are those models? Don't recreate a wheel. Go look and see what other people are doing and talk with them and learn. Pam, you got it.
The North Valley Food Bank in Whitefish just got a new VISTA program, a VISTA person, and that's her job for this year.
Yeah, I mean, so there's
Just started.
in your backyard, there could be like the most amazing resources you could ever find. And if they aren't there, those partners in your backyard can probably help you figure out how to put it together.
And CSKT has a gleaning program on the Flathead Reservation.
So something else I would add, when you've got Mountain West Economic Development, those guys are wonderful from if the business component side, if you guys wanted to really start looking at what does that look like from the entrepreneurship component and start looking at it. I'm going to be working with my counterparts across the nation. So as the administrator of the Cooperative Council, I serve as our administrator for the Ag Council. I have so many hats, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. But there's a handful of us across the states, and we're actually meeting Monday to start talking about this labor workforce scenario. There's a lot of labor co-ops in the farm world. Part of what we're doing is a research project to try to figure out how to mimic what we're doing in the farm world to other industries, because workforce is such an extremely big issue right now, big being kind of an understatement. But I think that that's another avenue that you guys can definitely be looking at is there a way to, whether it's formally or not, but to share some employees and how you can do that to make sure that all of that's going. And then if you want to do processing, you've got Jan right down the road. She knows a lot about it. You've got that access to it. But then if you wanted to create something of your own, Mountain West has some incredible people right there. And then they actually have a co-op development specialist from our office in their office as well. So there's a ton of resources. If I may, Courtney, how many of you guys know your local economic developer? Okay, a good portion of you, good. If you don't, the best way to find out who is serving your area, so from an economic development standpoint, we do have local development organizations. They usually cover like a county, and then we have regional, and then there's statewide. We're not a hierarchy system, but you can see those. If you go to MEDA members, MEDA members.org, they have a listing of all the economic developers in the state of Montana, plus most of the agencies that are available to help build economic resources or that have those economic resources. So the Montana Economic Developers Association, that's what MEDA stands for. If you don't know your local economic developer, please get to know them, because even if they can't help you, the chances of them being able to bring in a resource is going to be extremely strong. Or if they don't know, they'll know Jan, or they'll know me, or they'll know somebody in that field. We all like to, we're like children, we bicker a lot, but we're actually really good friends. And we do support each other, and we all network really well together. So please make sure that you're reaching out to them and letting them know what you're working on.
Are there other specific examples of identifying a need in your community that either you're not sure where to go with it next, or any specific projects like that? I thought that was a great example.
What about small towns that have like one grocery store and it runs the whole town, but it's not good food? How do you eat? I mean,
Yeah. Glad I'm not.
when you're
It's
expensive because you're rural and it's not mostly processed. It's not local food.
Competition.
Yeah. That's what she was.
Competition.
That building downtown Ennis could really be something.
The one they tore down?
No, the other one, one that looks like a barn.
So you guys will hear me say this. I literally, our logo this year is we can co-op that. So one more time, I'm going to tell you, if the community wants to look at a community-owned co-op, let's do it. The simple fact is that I don't like, here's the thing, I don't like to do competition that's unfair. Competition's healthy. And so if your local grocery store I can't believe I'm saying this because I know I'm being recorded. I'm going to, because anybody that knows me knows I'll just speak my mind. If your local grocery store is not listening to what you want, and you guys have gone in and said, we want local foods, you're too expensive, things are not working. Part of that could be the distribution situation that the state is facing. We know that that's a huge issue and that we're kind of struggling with it. But then the other thing is that force their hand, right? So if you start hearing a rumbling that a community is going to put together a grocery store co-op that's going to compete with it, see what happens. And then if that still doesn't, build it. Let's do it. We've got like Butte Grocery Store Co-op is up and moving forward, and they're doing all of the right things, but it was because they wanted healthy Montana local access foods.
And I'll also add, a lot of this stuff starts with simple gestures, neighbours exchanging produce across the back fence, that then becomes 5 people, that becomes a farmer's market, that then grows into something else. So don't be daunted by the prospect of co-op, and I'm a total co-op fan. And I've never seen so many resources for this stuff as through these economic development offices like Mission West and Bearpaw and everybody. But it starts with that simple gesture. So you just start with a little group, again, community, exchanging. Someone talked about lunch money for eggs yesterday, was one of the civic speakers. We've all been there. Start with that. And then once you start building community and exchanging ideas and sharing resources, then you very quickly get to co-op level and you've got the resources. And I've never met a prophet I didn't like. I am an entrepreneur and a business owner, but when you've got that, we all grew up with that situation. One grocery store, absolute rubbish food. That's why we all grew our own, because mum wouldn't let us eat the stuff we could get from the shop. So start with what you've got and then tap into your EDA, your local economic development folks. They'll show you how to get bank loans when you don't qualify once you're an organisation or an entity. And then you could go to the co-op model. Your resources are there. So sometimes it's better not to focus on the target, the grocery store. It's look at what you've got around you. That's your ecosystem. That's what you should tap into, and you'll be amazed at what's there. So if you only look at the grocery store, you'll miss everything else. If you look at the ecosystem around it, you'll find all the resources you need, and you'll end up being a complementer to the grocery store. You'll work well together.
And I would add that I think a lot of what the FADC network does and is trying to build on is just connecting people to resources in their community. So I'll get calls like, hey, where can I pasteurize? Where can I, is there somebody that works in the state distributing? And so just making those connections is a lot of what we do. And most of the FADCs are attached to economic development centers. And so it sort of expands the resources we have in that regards. And a lot of them do have loan funding that they give out themselves.
So we've got like less than 10 minutes. I want to ask a question and maybe pull in the group to answer as well, since we're all these beautiful, brilliant minds in here. What mistakes have either you made early on in your career, or maybe you helped somebody who made a mistake that if you shared today would save us all a lot of pain and heartache? And I'll let the audience speak up to that too, if a specific example pops to mind that you're like, I don't want anyone else to have to suffer that. Love to hear your answers on that.
I'll jump in at the first. So I did that brief stint of a private consulting world. And here I was very arrogantly thinking that I knew everything I needed to know because I was in the economic development world. I did not have the right CPA. I actually trusted the wrong CPA and it cost me a small fortune. So trust and know your CPA, ask tons of questions, and make sure that they are doing things that you want them to be doing. Number one thing I would recommend to anybody is when it comes to that kind of stuff, a strong CPA, accounting firm, or a bookkeeper, whatever your team is, do not cut corners in that area. I'm a small farm town kid. We grew up as poor could be, and we cut a lot of corners. You should see some of the things my mom taught me on how to build a fence or a barn or something. But when it comes to financial advisors, do not cut that corner. Make sure that you've got people on your side.
I second that.
Yeah. Well, of course, we operate a food processing facility and we help food businesses develop. And one of the major areas that we do a lot of work in is helping that food business deeply understand the regulatory world they're getting into. Because food is an industry that has a lot of layers of regulation. They have FDA, they have USDA, they have state, and they have local level. Counties can set those health departments can set their own rules for farmers markets. So I do spend a lot of time helping that entrepreneur or that business person really understand, you want to do this? Okay, let's think about the regulatory world you're going to step into and how you deeply understand it, and that you move forward very successfully, because you're not going to make that mistake of building, I want to milk my goats. I want to milk my goats and sell it to the restaurant. Come on.
They asked.
Yes, you asked for it. So with that, I said, are you friggin' crazy? But you're not crazy if you really understand it. You're not crazy if you feel like, okay, I understand what I need to do this to meet the regulatory world, and I have every ability to meet that. So that's one area that is really important if you're a food business, you want to expand food products, how you understand that world and how you best successfully move forward. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would say, starting the mushroom farm, a lot of what we learned is like using our community resources. I think what's really nice about some of these smaller areas in Montana is that it's not usually one person starting a business. It's almost like the communities starting a business together. And so just making sure you plug into those resources. And I feel like there's a lot of beauty behind the idea of being like self-sustaining and figuring it out on your own. But it can save you a lot of time to touch in with people in the community that have gone through this similar process before.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, each of our speakers, and I'm so pleased to be with you, has mentioned the word community. The mistake I've seen around the world, not just here, not just at Sally's Kootenai College, not with any program, every entrepreneur thinks that their idea is so secret and special, they've got to keep it to themselves, and that's a death sentence. The better approach is share your idea and trust the process, because you actually haven't thought it through. You think you have, but you haven't, and you won't know it until you work with your community and share that idea. And then you'll realize you're doing something completely different, 180 degrees different a year later than what you thought your idea was. I have this in my own family. I've got a niece that's just booked over $1 million in selling clothes, children's clothes online. She started out in a cafe. So again, she thought she had a special idea for the cafe. We got her talking with people in her local community, and here she is 18 months later, booking $1 million in sale in an online business she knew nothing about. But it was through those conversations like, Leah, could you put just this photo of these clothes in your cafe? That started the conversation. So what I'm saying to you is, don't treat your idea as precious. Treat it as your starter, like your sourdough. Share it with your community, and then you'll end up with something else besides a competing grocery. You'll end up with a cooperative, and from the cooperative, you'll end up with your holy trinity, whether you go to the co-op model or not. Your holy trinity is accountant, CPA, banker. Who do you think is the third one? Lawyer. Find them to work with you. If you don't have your holy trinity, then your final version of your idea won't come into reality. But as you get started, don't protect your idea and not share everything. It's better to overshare and then get everybody's input into it. And then you'll realize, oh my God, yeah, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to milk goats. I'll get someone else to milk goats, and then you become the broker for the milking service for the goats. That's where the money is.
That's where the money is. There you go.
Right? So don't, my advice is, and I've done this, but I've seen it in all of these countries with all these thousands of women entrepreneurs thinking that their idea is so special, only they can hold it, when in actual fact, you need to take that thought for a walk with your community and get input. If you look at the resources sitting in this room, the lady that wears 2 bras, I want to talk to you. That is like huge. But the pole vaulter, the professional softball, volleyball player, the ladies I met last night, tribal members, reach out both ways, because tribal entrepreneurship is different to white entrepreneurship. Tribal women entrepreneurship is very different to rural white women entrepreneurship. You might all be farmers, but your processes are different. You can learn so much from that, and that can create another opening door to new forms of entrepreneurship. If you don't share your idea with your community, you'll never get to that point.
Any final burning questions before we go have lunch?
Stefan, how have you been able to stay in good contact with the women in Afghanistan? And
That's what I did last night. I'm still trying to get them evacuated, my former staff. We made a directory. It took us 2 years, but we made a directory, and it started at 3 villages, and it then became 11-section directory for a county, and then 3 counties. And we've made it as an online resource, and we got funding for it through USAID. And I suggested this when we had our first connection call, just to have that directory in this membership of this group at this conference would be a phenomenal resource. Entrepreneurship has all sorts of shades. There's what we call handbag entrepreneurship, cash in, cash out. No tax, don't declare anything. It's like, I had my eggs, I sold them, it goes in somewhere else. And then you get into what I call grey entrepreneurship. You're half legal and half not. I'm totally for it. Yeah, it's the milk and the goats, right? Because you don't have a business name or registered with the state. There's all sorts of steps towards it. So the way I keep in touch with all of these women is not so much with all the thousands of women, but I'm still in touch with all the managers and the executive directors that lead these organisations, and they're all still doing amazing stuff across all these countries. And we all made directories so that you could go to that directory and you'd say, God, I want to do felt hat making. Who's in the local county that does this? Where do I find this? So this might be a product for Farmers Union, because I'll just show it up.
It's a great point if we could potentially share the attendee list if people are open to it.
Yeah. So that's how we stay in touch.
Well, thank you very much. Let's give one final, before we give a final round, Mr. President.
I could go on to the list of failures I've had, and I'm not going to go there because we don't have enough time. But I do want to recognize that we've been honored by the presence of our new USDA Rural Director from the state of Montana, Kathleen Williams. I've noticed that she's been diligently taking notes during this whole presentation. But thank you for coming, Kathleen.
Will you be sticking around, Kathleen, for a
I'll be here into the afternoon.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, panel. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this conversation.
Thank you.